Dear students, in the preceding classes, we have discussed the economic model of consumer behavior using what is known as indifference curve analysis. In this session and also in the subsequent sessions, we will summarize some of our findings. As we have stated earlier, the problem of the consumer is very simple. He has to choose the best bundle. That is, he has to choose the bundle which maximizes utility. That is, the bundle which he can afford that maximizes utility. The aim of a consumer is maximization of utility, but he cannot choose any bundle. We talk about affordable bundles, bundles which he can purchase given the prices of commodities and also given the money income of the consumer. And we call the object of the consumer as a consumption bundle. We assume that a consumer is interested in consumption bundle, a bundle consisting of quantities of k number of commodities. A bundle consisting of quantities of k number of commodities. Now, a consumer's choice of the preferred bundle, a consumer's choice, that is, which bundle he will choose, which bundle he will choose depends not only on the prices of commodities and income of the consumer, but also his taste and preferences. And the taste and preferences are given by what is known as the preference relation. His choice, which bundle he will choose, depends not only on the prices of commodities and the income of the consumer, but also the taste and preferences of the consumer. And taste and preferences are given by the preference relation. That is, we have stated the preference relation in detail. Given any two bundles, x1, y1, x2, y2, any two bundles, x1, y2, x1, y1 and x2, y2, consumer can rank these bundles. It is assumed that the consumer can rank these bundles according to his preferences. That is, the bundle x1, y1 is preferred to or indifferent to the bundle x2, y2 given by the preference relation. He strictly prefers x1, y1 to x2, y2, weakly prefers x1, y1 to x2, y2, or indifference between x1, y1 and x2, y2 given by the preference relation. And this preference relation enables us to rank bundles from the least preferred to the most preferred. Now, the consumer has to make a decision about which commodity bundle he has to choose. And for the consistency of consumer preferences, we make two assumptions about the preferences of the consumer. One is completeness. The other one is transitivity. we make two assumptions, completeness and transitivity. If the ranking of the consumer satisfy these two axioms, then we will say that the consumer is rational. The consumer is rational. Rationality is defined in terms of completeness and transitivity. Now it turns out that the whole theory of consumer choice can be formulated in terms of preferences that satisfy the axioms plus a few technical assumptions. It turns out that the whole theory of consumer choice can be expressed in terms of consumer preferences satisfying these axioms. If the consumer is able to rank his preferences satisfying these axioms, then his choice can be deduced from his preferences. So it turns out that the whole theory of consumer choice can be formulated in terms of preferences that satisfy the axioms. Actually, what we are doing here is, from preferences we are making inferences about choice. From preferences of the consumer, we are making inferences about which bundle he will choose. We can also make an assumption about the preferences by observing his choices. That is another theory, revealed preference theory. However, it is convenient to describe preferences graphically using what is known as indifference curves. There is a convenient method for describing preferences graphically using a construct known as indifference curve. To explain what is an indifference curve, we have considered all these points in details. Suppose y and x, and suppose you select a point x1, y1. Then suppose that the two commodities in the bundle are x and y, and you select a certain bundle x1, y1, and select all the bundles which are weakly preferred to x1, y1. Weakly preferred means bundles which are equal to or greater than x1, y1. That is, all the bundles which are x1, y1 greater than or equal to or greater than. And in the graph, this is the this shaded area represents all the bundles which are weakly preferred to x1, y1, and we call this the weakly preferred set. We call this weakly preferred set. And the bundles in the boundary of the set, that is, boundary of the set means bundles which are indifferent to x1, y1 constitute what is known as the indifference curve. The bundle in the boundary of the weakly preferred set is the indifference curve. Remember this. If you can specify that, if you know the taste and preferences of the consumer, satisfying these assumptions, we can deduce the choice of consumer from this, assuming that he is able to rank all the bundles from the least preferred to the most preferred, and characterized by completeness and transitivity. This will enable us to rank the bundles from the least preferred to the most preferred, and we can select the most preferred, that is the choice of the consumer. But the choice problem can be specified using a graphical device known as indifference curve. Remember this. If you ask a question, how do you deduce information about the preference of the consumer? One procedure is you conduct a survey, but it will be, conducting a survey will be hypothetical. There is no guarantee that you will get an exact idea about the choice of the consumer by asking him about his preferences. That is an issue which is confronted by those who conduct surveys to get information about the preferences of the consumer and his possible choices. Another one, as I told you, is observe the choices made by the consumer, and from the choices made by the consumer deduce what will be his preferences. That is revealed preference approach. That is, the first is from preference to choice, indifference curve approach. The second is from choice to preference, that is the revealed preference approach. So indifference curve is a way of describing preferences. A way of describing preferences. Now, any reasonable preference can be depicted by indifference curves, and the shape depends on the type of preferences. Any reasonable preference can be represented by indifference curves, and the shape depends on the type of preferences. As we have discussed earlier, if x and y are perfect substitutes, this is the shape. If x and y are perfect complements, this is the shape. If y is a bad commodity, x is a good commodity, the shape is like this. If y is an inert ingredient, y is an active ingredient, the shape is like this. So preferences can be represented by indifference curves. Indifference curves are used to represent. The normal shape of the indifference curve is downward sloping convex. To get to this shape, actually, we have to make two more assumptions, axioms about preferences. We have considered only two, generally completeness and transitivity. For locating the shape, or to make the shape more specific, for pinpointing the shape, we make two more assumptions. That is, to describe the preferences in general, we make two more assumptions. And these assumptions are the basis of well-behaved indifference curves. The basis of well-behaved indifference curves. And one is, the third axiom is, as we have discussed, non-satiation. Non-satiation assumption is, if x1, y1 and x2, y2 are two bundles such that the bundle x2, y2 contain at least a little more of x or y, then the bundle x2, y2 is preferred to x1, y1. This axiom guarantees that indifference curve is negatively sloped. This is the case, this is the case. These are not cases of negative slope. Another one is, averages are preferred to extremes. I will explain these points once more in my next video. Averages are preferred to extremes. This axiom says that if x1, y1 and x2, y2 are two bundles, then 1 by 2 x1 plus 1 by 2 x2 and 1 by 2 y1 plus 1 by 2 y2 is preferred to the original bundles x1 y1 x2 y2, and these bundles are constructed by taking the averages of x1 and x2, y1 and y2. So averages are preferred to extremes. Now remember this, if we add these two axioms, then indifference curve will be negatively sloped convex to the origin. Such an indifference curve is known as well-behaved indifference curve. Well-behaved indifference curve. So well-behaved indifference curve require the assumptions, completeness, transitivity, non-satiation, and averages are preferred to extremes. All these points were discussed in detail. So this is only a summary of what I have discussed. So we have preferences and indifference curve to represent preferences. But there is an easy way to represent indifference curve. Rather than specifying indifference curves in terms of preferences, we represent indifference curves by specifying the utility function. We can derive the indifference curves by specifying utility functions rather than preferences, because it is more convenient. If you specify a particular utility function, then associated with the preferences, then it is easy to derive indifference curves. And this is the approach that we use to construct indifference curves. We specify a utility function and indifference curves are derived. We have specified a Cobb-Douglas utility function. The resulting indifference curve is this. We have specified a utility function for perfect substitutes. This is the shape. Perfect complements. This is the shape. Then a utility function for one good, one bad. Utility function for active ingredients, like that. So instead of drawing indifference curves from preferences, what we do is we draw indifference curve from utility functions. So remember all these points when you study indifference curve analysis. Preferences, assumptions about preferences, then axioms about preferences, then depending on the type of preferences we derive the indifference curves. This is a procedure. Another procedure is we specify the utility function associated with the different preferences, and from the utility functions we derive indifference curves. And this is the route which we will take in the subsequent analysis.